So hello, Honors 201. This video is about Antigone, Greek tragedy. We're going to be reading another Greek tragedy that you've probably already read by now, Medea. I'll be making a video on Medea shortly. But for Antigone, I got some questions that I would like you to consider when you're writing your reflection and when you're thinking about this stuff. Antigone brings up a lot of interesting ideas. And the most important, it seems to me, to be the big idea, is the concept here of what to do when a person's personal ideas and conscience and morals and their beliefs, perhaps their religious beliefs, perhaps just strong moral convictions for whatever reason, when those things conflict with the law of the state. So in this particular case, right, Creon has declared that his nephew, the traitor, cannot be buried and must be picked apart by birds. And Antigone, his sister, the sister of the nephew, um, um, says to her uncle Creon, no, you can't just do that. You can't just leave your nephew out to be picked apart by birds, even if he is a traitor, even if he did some horrible stuff. And Creon's argument is roughly, no, he's a traitor. He deserves what he gets. Anybody who betrays the state doesn't deserve any sort of respect from the state, anything like that. And so the question, I think, is the bigger question is, does a person individually sort of, well, okay, a couple of things here. One, does a person individually just have a certain amount of dignity as a person that requires them to be treated like other people? So again, so the point here is we've got a bad person who did something wrong against the state, but do they still deserve a proper funeral? Do they still deserve some sort of dignity in regard to what life tends to be? Or do their actions, if their actions are bad enough, do their actions prohibit them from having being treated with the dignity and respect that we expect from all people? And so this is a complicated question. So on the one hand, I suppose I want to say people deserve a certain amount of inherent respect just for being human. Certainly when somebody dies, it seems like you don't need to hold a grudge against them anymore. At the same time, you look at somebody like, let's just make it really bad, and let's just say Hitler. So Hitler, awful human being, did lots and lots of awful, awful stuff. Um, can you make an argument that even Hitler deserves a sort of proper burial? Can you make the argument that even Hitler, deserves a certain amount of human dignity and respect? Which actually, when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about all the other Nazi war criminals who were tried in international court and got lawyers and had people defend them, and they got to have their say in court. We didn't just kill them outright, even though many of them deserved that. And if Hitler had survived the war, I believe he probably would have been in front of that court too. We would have treated him with a certain amount of respect, despite the fact that he's Hitler. We would have treated him to a trial, etc. So this is a question, right? And for my own self, I don't even really know the answer. I do feel like that there are people in my life who perhaps have done things that I don't agree with. Does that mean that I change my basic sense of human respect for him, even if that disagreement is sort of a huge disagreement? I don't know. I like to think that we're supposed to be kind no matter what. Oh, that reminds me of the recent little controversy. I don't know if y'all saw this, but when at a football game or something, Ellen DeGeneres was sitting by George Bush, and some people got mad at Ellen DeGeneres for I guess, being nice to George Bush. And Ellen DeGeneres' comment was simply, hey, I'm going to be nice to everyone, even people that I disagree with. But not everyone feels like that. Some people feel like, no, you don't deserve that. So this seems like to me to be the big question. To what degree does a human being just deserve respect for being a human being? And to what degree do they deserve respect based solely on their actions? So I guess there are different ways of looking at that. Creon says, hey, it's your actions that matter. You act like a traitor, you're going to be treated like a traitor. Antigone says, no, it doesn't matter what your actions are. You're my brother. You deserve a funeral. So I don't know the answer to that. And that's just something to think about. Another thing that I think is interesting to think about is that King Creon, does not change his mind till near the end of the play when the seer, the blind seer, comes to him and tells him that he needs to change his mind. But that doesn't convince Creon. He's already had a number of people asking him to change his mind. His future, Haman, his future son-in-law, or son-in-law, I'm sorry, I might be getting that wrong right now. He tells the king, hey, everybody thinks you're wrong. Isn't that a good enough reason to change your mind? Everybody thinks you're wrong. And he says, no, that's not a good enough reason to change my mind. It doesn't matter if everyone thinks I'm wrong. This is the right thing to do. Antigone says, you shouldn't do this because it's the wrong thing, not because other people think it's the wrong thing, but you shouldn't do it just on principle. It's the right thing to treat your nephew with respect. It's wrong not to. This argument doesn't move Creon either. He's like, I don't care. I think I know what's right. What's right is to follow the laws of the state. And of course, Antigone says, no, what's right is to follow the laws of the gods, something like that. And so people have made arguments with Creon to change his mind and to lighten up. And he doesn't do that until the seer shows up. And so somebody says, hey, you need to change your mind because it's the right thing to do. And somebody else says, you need to change your mind because everybody else in the world thinks that you're wrong. You need to change your mind. And it's not till the seer comes and says, listen, if you don't change your mind, karma's going to be a bitch and you are going to pay for it. And when Creon hears that he's going to pay for it, that he's going to lose one of his sons, it's at that moment that all of a sudden he decides, whoa, shit, maybe I was wrong. Okay, so what are we supposed to do with that? I guess the question that I guess I wonder is, are people moved by arguments about principle or about what's right and wrong? Or are people only moved by arguments that have something to do with themselves? So for instance, now with the virus going around, the coronavirus things, there's a number of people who say, hey, I'm watching out for me. What do I mean here? I'm watching out for me. Do I just care about myself? There's some people who are like, well, I'm not going to get too sick. I might as well go out and do what I want to do. What does it matter? Other people, right? When it's when it's your life on the line, when you're the person who can get sick, maybe we change how we feel about that, right? Maybe if we're sitting at home with a couple of old people who have bronchial infections, maybe all of a sudden we're a little more concerned about something other than just ourselves. I always think of, this makes me think of Dick Cheney. I don't know if y'all know Dick Cheney was vice president under George Bush. Dick Cheney, a very conservative individual. But Dick Cheney, unlike everybody else in his conservative circle at the time, Dick Cheney was pro-gay marriage. And the reason why he was pro-gay marriage is because he had a daughter who was a lesbian. And he has a daughter who's a lesbian. That affects him. That is his deal. That's important to him. And therefore, he is lets that argument sway him to change his mind on all these other arguments that conservatives agree. This is why we should not have gay marriage. And yet Dick Cheney says, yeah, but I got a daughter, and therefore I'm going to support gay marriage. So do we only care when stuff affects us? Is that the only time that we care? I'm thinking about arguments on Facebook and stuff like that. How many good arguments do people make? How many people are logical and have great statistics and all that stuff? And it doesn't convince anyone. Nobody changes their mind. What's the deal with that? Do any of our arguments work? Do arguments work, period? Do they ever work? Or should we just always be appealing to people's selfishness and saying, hey, if you don't do this, it's going to hurt you? And that's the only way you can get people to do stuff. I don't know. Something to think about. Um, so, another thing that I wanted to address quickly was the idea of symbolic gestures. Antigone, unable to bury her brother by herself, cannot dig the hole and put him in the hole and fill up the hole. Instead, she simply sprinkles dirt on him as a symbolic gesture of him being buried, and she pours out some libations, some sort of, prayers, whatnot, over his grave or over his body, which is just covered in dirt. So my question is why is it so important? She's willing to risk her life. She's willing to die just to put dirt over her brother, which is just a symbolic gesture. The birds are still going to pick him apart. He's still going to rot to death outside, or rot to death. He's still going to rot in his death outside. So covering him up with dirt doesn't do any good at all, except for the fact that it's a symbolic gesture. And that symbolic gesture is so important to her that she's ready to die for that symbolic gesture. So I wonder why symbolic gestures are so important to us. I'm thinking about, right, like in our society, we could say like, high school graduation, right? That's a symbolic gesture. Or graduation from college. You don't need to go through the ceremony. You don't need to wear the robe. You don't need to do all that stuff. It's just a symbol. And we think that symbol's important for some reason. Our weddings, where people you don't need to have a wedding to be married. You can just go to the courthouse. But no, people do all sorts of stuff. They wear certain clothing. They wear something blue and they have flowers, and all of the symbolism is really important. Why do we care so much? And I don't know, except for the idea, as I'm thinking that symbols from time to time can be just incredibly powerful. I'm thinking, for one, about Colin Kaepernick and him kneeling during the national anthem. And as a symbolic gesture, obviously, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't hurt anyone. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't stop the national anthem from playing. It's just a gesture, a symbol. And yet, obviously, that symbol was so controversial because symbols can be really important. So why are symbols so important? Not sure I know. I didn't go to my college graduation. That didn't seem that important to me. I did have a wedding, though. That seemed important to me. Um, so who knows? What's the value of symbolic gestures? And then just a couple other things real quick, just stuff I want you to think about, maybe things that you can think about more on your own. One, I wanted to point out that this was sibling rivalry again that we're seeing here between the two brothers, one good and one bad. They kill each other, both die at the same time. This reminds me of the numerous sibling rivalries we've already seen. If we want to call Gilgamesh and Kidu sibling rivalries, we've got Jacob and Esau, we've got Cain and Abel. So we see this again, the idea of sibling rivalry, the idea of family being the people close to you are the people that you most need to fear in life, which is obviously, again, from statistics, etc., we know crimes are mostly committed by people who know each other, not strangers. So the people who are close to you are people that you have to worry about. So sibling rivalry, again, here is important. Also, too, money's brought up a couple of times about how money ruins people and money makes everything worse. We're going to talk about that more when we talk about the New Testament, when we talk about Socrates. This is an idea that's been around and is an interesting idea, right? Money is the root of all evil. Is that true or not? Again, I don't know. Another thing, Creon at one point in time says, once somebody is an enemy, they are never a friend. Once an enemy, never a friend. And that goes along with this sort of last question that I have, which is, to what degree can people amend to what degree can people fix their mistakes? If they are contrite and if they come up and they say they're sorry and they change their actions and etc. Do Can we forgive anything? Is anything potentially forgivable if somebody tries hard enough to make up for it? Or are there certain things that you simply cannot make up for that are unforgivable? Again, I don't necessarily have a good answer to those questions, but those are questions that I would like you to think about. And whatever thoughts you have, I would love to see those in the comment box. So let me know, people. I'll talk to you soon.